Well, Jerry Jones hired his man, but did he get it right? Who knows how this is going to work out? He got somebody familiar. We'll talk about that in just a second here on Locked On NFL.
The barbershop is open and Tony Wiggins has a chair for you. He's ready with some real NFL talk. The local experts of Locked On bring their expertise, and Wiggy is ready with his clippers and shears. Sit down and enjoy. The new Locked On NFL starts now. Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Oh, yeah, man. What's going on, good people? This is your man, Tony Wiggins, here in the barbershop on Locked On NFL, where we bring you the biggest stories from around the National Football League with the use of local experts. And shout out to the everydayers for joining us, man. And if it's your first time, I hope you enjoy the ride. Today's show, as always, here on Thursdays is sponsored and brought to you by Prize Picks. It's our crossover Thursday. There's only one crossover left, really, and that is the big one from the game. But nevertheless, crossover Thursday is presented by Prize Picks. Download the app and use the code Locked On NFL to win $50 instantly when you play just $5. A lot going on in the National Football League. I've been down at the Senior Bowl all week looking at prospects. And my man, Chris Carter, is our guest on Thursdays, as always. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to talk about the Titans at the end of the show. The Titans, they may pass up quarterback at number one. Is that smart? Is it a mistake? We'll also tap into the Steelers quarterback situation and what they're going to do in the offseason. It sounds like it's a Russell Wilson reboot. We'll see what Chris has to say about that. Right in the middle of the show, best future, Bills or Commanders? Very, very interesting question and interesting take from our squad show. Folks, we'll hear that. But we're going to start the show as promised. Did the Dallas Cowboys get it right? Chris Carter, I guess we can sound like Bill Clinton. I guess that means what your definition of right is, right? You know, maybe they are comfortable with this. Obviously, it's hiring Brian Schottenheimer as a head coach. He was offense coordinator a couple of years ago in Dallas. Or is this much to do about Jerry just making sure that he gets somebody that he can always just really, really control?
You know, I don't know the inner workings of how Brian Schottenheimer, if he, is a yes man to Jerry Jones or anything like this. I can't speak on that. I can speak on his history as an offensive coordinator. He's been with the Cowboys for 2 years, and the 1 year that he didn't have, a decimated offense, they had the number one scoring offense in the NFL. And so I look at that and I think if you want to, make this offense more efficient with Dak Prescott and CeeDee Lamb, which is the top two guys they've sunk their money into, I can understand that. And I don't know the inner workings of that. I also know that this past year where Dak Prescott was hurt and that the Cowboys were kind of in a rough position, it broke a streak of 4 straight years where his offenses as an offensive coordinator between the Cowboys and the Seahawks ranked in the top 10 in scoring. And granted, there's about a 3-year break in there because he got let go from the Seahawks, at a certain point. But I think that if you want to go with an offensive mind, sure, he's one of those guys. But he's also been around the league. He's also been in the league since 2006. So I think where Cowboys fans are frustrated and they're like, hey man, like we'd like to, if you're firing Mike McCarthy, a guy who had a few 12-win seasons, then I had a bad year this year when everyone got hurt. We'd like to see you try to go in a new direction. And when you fire Mike McCarthy, a long-time offensive-minded coach, you then go to Brian Schottenheimer, a long-time offensive-minded coach. And I think there's questions as far as, like, is this just a repeat? And I think that's where you'd look at it and say, like, this, you're going for another long-experienced guy who, the question is he that innovative, or has he coached, offenses with really good players in it? So I think there's reason always to question things, especially when it comes to the Cowboys and, how they're moving, because Jerry Jones kind of just welcomes it with the way that he approaches things and the way he handles things in Dallas. But, when it comes to coaching wise, I always give coaches, the grace to figure things out, especially, when they get, so so to answer, I'm not going to pretend like I know anything special in Dallas, but I'm just looking at Brian Schottenheimer's record and what his track record had been. I can see reason for it, but I can also understand fans being like, man, we were hoping for some, new, younger, innovative pick, or maybe, someone who could coach up the defensive side of the ball while you hired you kept maybe Schottenheimer at OC and you said, hey, Brian, your job's to make that offense go while we have this defensive guy. But hey, maybe that's their plan with Schottenheimer being the head coach and letting a really good defensive coordinator coach the defense.
No doubt about it. Listen to Landon McCool and my man Marcus Mosier from Locked On Cowboys talk about it. And then when we come back, what I'll do is I'll give you my little spin on it and tell you why I think it's a pretty decent move because it's all attached to one person. Check this out.
I think that we saw a guy that, looks the part for sure. And now the question becomes like, how does he build his roster? How does the team look?
I thought he impressed. And again, that's where we thought he would. He is a very good public speaker. He does a really good job of connecting with players. I wish we could have heard more from Schottenheimer on like what his scheme was going to be. We did get to some of that, and I want to touch on that. But I wanted to hear about
Patrick Walker, by the way.
Yeah. I wanted to hear some thoughts on like how does he view analytics? What does he think of like going for it on fourth down and like certain game situations rather than some of the other nonsense we heard? But like some of the key words that he said that I liked was talked about more shifts and more motions and how he thinks the current batch of players that he has right now does really well when they play with tempo and that they don't have to go out there and think so much. So he said a lot of things like if you were worried about what this offense was going to look like, I think those should encourage you.
I'll tell you what, I have experienced with Shotty when he was here in Jacksonville. In fact, he was here in the disastrous Urban Meyer year. And of course, Urban said he couldn't coach. Urban said all of those dudes were idiots. And it turns out a whole bunch of those dudes that was on Urban's staff are doing real well at their spot. So I guess everybody wasn't out of touch. It was him,
Mm-hmm.
But still, looking and sounding the part is good. We never know when a guy's an offensive play caller, an offensive mind, or a defensive mind for that matter, whether or not they are a leader of men. And I do believe that's important. I think this is about Dak Prescott. I think Dak had some of the best years of his career with Schottenheimer as the offensive coordinator and being directly involved with him. We won't know how this is going to turn out until we see the results. They have to really, really fix some parts of that roster. They're a real top-heavy team, man. And the one thing that Dallas was always known for is having an offensive line. They're known for having an offensive line like the Steelers are known for having a front seven. It's just, you go back through the years, Hudson Houck used to be Coach Stoutland, who's in Philly right now. That Hudson Houck was the guy that had that continuity along with Dante Scarnecchia and guys like that who were in Philadelphia. But they really, really do have to. I think Dallas has to be less Hollywood and just be more Main Street USA, man, and get the infrastructure of that team fixed. And whoever coaches that team, I think, has to be the type of person who can handle the fact that Jerry Jones is going to be. You're not going to be coach-centric. You're going to be owner-centric. And Jerry Jones is going to do a press conference damn near before you even get out of the locker room talking to your players every week. And I think that's a little bit of a challenge for anybody, Chris.
No, I think it is a challenge. And I think that's the thing is that if you're going to Dallas or you're rising up in Dallas to be the head coach, you have to know that that's the dynamic you're going to be in, And I think that's the thing is that like it's not a secret anymore that that's just how that's how things work in Dallas, right? Like if you're going to take that head coaching job, it's the challenge that comes with it is that Jerry Jones is going to be vocal, he's going to be talking, and sometimes he may talk over your head, to the media. And you got to be prepared to handle that kind of big time situation. So, again, I think it's going to be a matter of, can he make that offense more efficient? Can he get those up? Like you said, they're a top heavy, roster when you look at the salary cap assignments that they have, but they're talented and they have to figure it out. So, I think certainly if there's confidence in him as a leader, that he's a leading voice and that he can unite the team, more power to him. I see both sides of this equation in that he's been a good offensive coordinator for multiple years in the NFL. But I also see that there's the anxiety that are we just doing Mike McCarthy all over again?
Right.
And again, I'm not so sure that Mike McCarthy was the biggest problem for Dallas. I think it is that they are a top heavy team and what they put together. But hey, Jerry Jones wants to run his show. Let him run his show, and we'll see if he can finally get the Cowboys back to the Super Bowl for the first time in 30 years.
Yeah, Jerry owns the team. He can do what he wants to do. And if you don't believe him, ask him. He'll tell you. It's my team. It's my job. I ain't biased to turn it over to nobody else. All right, here's what we're going to do. We're going to talk about their rival. Washington, who had a really, really good year. I heard that Daniel Snyder was over in London hating it that Washington was doing so well, and that's fitting. But do they have a brighter future of the two teams who lost the championship games, Buffalo and Washington? Who has the brighter future? We have an interesting take from our NFL squad show. We'll get to that in just a second here on Locked On NFL. Today's show is sponsored and brought to you by our friends over at Intuit TurboTax. Taxes used to be waiting and wondering and worrying if you were going to get any money back, right? And then waiting and wondering and worrying some more. Now, this is what taxes is. It's matching with the TurboTax expert who can do your taxes as soon as today. An expert who gives your taxes their undivided attention as they work on your return while you get real-time updates on their progress so you can focus on your day. An expert who will find you every deduction possible and file every form, every investment, everything with 100% accuracy. Also, you can get the most money back, guaranteed. No waiting, no wondering, no worries. Now, this is what taxes is. Get an expert now on TurboTax.com. Only available with TurboTax Live full service, real-time updates, only an iOS mobile app. See guarantee details at turbotax.com/guarantee. All right, rolling along with my man, Chris Carter, Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, Locked On Steelers, and all that other stuff. One of the busiest people I know, but he's always takes the time to come in here on Thursdays and handle business with us. Speaking of handling business, Washington did that in one season, turned their entire season around. Buffalo, I was on record saying that Buffalo had their window had closed, and that window opened right back up, and they made it all the way to a championship game where they were very, very competitive for a long time. But there are some people that don't really believe that they'll ever beat Kansas City because they just seem like they can't do it. Who has the best future moving forward? Chris, before I hear from you, we're going to hear from the squad shows. We're going to talk about who has the best future between Buffalo and the Washington Commanders.
Commanders or Bills, Sarah? Who do you got has the best chance of getting over the hump next year to get to the big game?
Well, I think the Commanders have the best shot, and it's because the Bills have to go against their arch rivals, the kryptonite that is the Kansas City Chiefs. I mean, realistically, they haven't beaten them in the playoffs anytime recently, and so I don't know. I don't have any faith in the Bills anymore. I'm sitting over here with all my Broncos gear wondering, when is somebody going to finally take these guys down? And we're over here like, Josh Allen, he's Superman. He can finally do it. He can be. I'm sick of putting my hope in Josh Allen. I'm done putting faith in Josh Allen. You know what? I'd rather see Bo Nix at this point figure it out and make it happen. And I hope that does happen. But I think the Commanders have a much better chance, even though they play arguably in a much tougher division with the team that's representing the NFC in the Super Bowl. Just feel like, man, the NFC is a little bit more open than the AFC at this point. I mean, what are you supposed to do about the Kansas City Chiefs? I have no idea, and the Bills obviously don't either.
All right, so my man Sayer, he is either just sick of people talking about the Bills and having their chances to beat Kansas City, or he might be a little bit hurt that Buffalo might be in Denver's way, Locked On Broncos. He's like, hey, man, I ain't worried about Buffalo. Screw the Bills. I hope they lose every single time. But realistically, man, I do think Jaden Daniels, because he's young, because that entire team is young, because everything is fresh, they're dealing with a different circumstances. It feels like they were playing with house money as opposed to Buffalo. Buffalo was just sitting there hoping and wishing that they were going to beat Kansas City.
So I feel you on that. But here's the thing. When I look at these two teams, I agree that if you're looking at as far as the competition you have to go through, it's not just the Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs. You got to go through Lamar Jackson and the Ravens. And yeah, you beat him this year, but you beat him because Mark Andrews fumbled in the fourth quarter and then dropped the 2-point conversion. I think if you ran that back, that might be that could be a coin flip of a game. So, and then you got Joe Burrow in that same conference. So you look at the quarterback prowess in that conference, and you're the guy you're the team that has Josh Allen, and you're also a team. They got a lot of money tied up right now. I can see that argument. But here's the thing that I think that if you're weighing the Commanders and the Bills, it's two different styles of rosters and where they're coming from versus where they're going. For example, if you're looking at the roster building, you might look at and say, as far as their salary cap and what they can do moving forward, that the Commanders have the advantage, because you look at their roster right now, they have $86.6 million in cap space going into next year. They can spend so much to improve their roster right now, and that's exciting, right? That's really good, and you'd like to be able to add to that roster and find more answers. And if they let go Marshawn Lattimore, that's going to be over $100 million. So they have money to make moves. The Bills don't have money to make moves. They're $7.4 million in the hole. They're going to have to make some moves to free up cap space, and they probably could, because they can let go of a guy like Von Miller, because he's 35 years old.
Right.
They'll clear the cap space easily there, but they'd be limited in how they do it. So you look at that and say, well, the Commanders have a clear advantage. But then you look on the flip side of this, and you remember team building is important. The reason why the Bills have all that money tied up is because they've been hitting in the draft. They've been getting guys that they like. You look at their top picks for the past few years and the guys that are still on their roster. Their first pick last year, Keon Coleman, young receiver. You're hoping he continues to develop. The first year for that, Dalton Kincaid, tight end player, dropped that pass in the big game, but still a playmaker. Kyer Elam, Gregory Rousseau, AJ Epineza, Ed Oliver, Josh Allen. So go back to 2018. You're looking at just contributor, really good player. And you're seeing that development. And so that's why they have so much money tied up. Like Ed Oliver, going all the way back to your pick in 2019, is a really good contributor. And they've been hitting on those. So let's do the same analysis there for the Commanders. You had Jaden Daniels, top pick this year. Awesome job. Emmanuel Forbes was your top pick the year before that. He's already off the team. Jahan Dotson, year before that, already off the team. Jamin Davis, year before that, already off the team. Chase Young, year before that, already off the team. Dwayne Haskins, rest in peace. He passed away, but he was also off the team. You have to go back to 2018 to find another top pick from the Commanders franchise.
Wow.
Who's still on the roster, and that's Deron Payne back in 2018. I think that's the problem that faces the Commanders, is that, they have the money to spend, but it's because they've missed for so long. And the question will be, is this 1 year a sign that this new wave of the organization without Dan Snyder has figured it out? Or is this going to be a one-hit wonder and they're going to have another bad draft next year? That's what that front office have to prove. And I'm not going to say that they're going to go either, positive or negative. But to me, that's the question that's right now is, do you want the Bills' overall structure that has them as competitors, that has hit and draft picks, and that has seemed to know what the kind of players they want to add to this roster? Or do you want to just roll the dice with the Commanders and saying, like, hey, they have this space to correct, they have this space to fix, and there's a whole new path there. I think there's excitement there. But to Sarah's point, I think that the other question is who you have to go through. And if you're looking at the NFC, the Eagles right now are your main competition. Will Jordan Love rise up with the Packers? Will the 49ers return to prominence soon? But I think will Detroit be healthy next year? I don't think it's easy in the NFC, but certainly the quarterback list is less daunting in that conference. So I hear his point there. I think this is a lot more even than people want, but simply because they're coming from different perspectives and what they're going to have to do next season to be competitive.
And you know what it's like? It's like Washington's entering into a space now where expectations change, and they're entering a space where Buffalo has navigated for the last 6 or 7 years very well. Turning over their roster, making sure that they do. I had to apologize. I thought Bill's window was closing. Here they go. They had maybe their best season this year because of the development that you talk about. And they did it with some injuries too on their defense. And the thing is, man, is they have shown year over year that they understand how to manage and do this and ride this thing out with a great quarterback. Washington now has to prove that. And it's always different when you get into a different space. One thing Washington does have in their favor is they're going to have some staff continuity. And that's a good thing for them. Cliff Kingsbury taking his name out of any consideration for a head coaching job. Mainly, I know Ross is going to kill me when I say this, but he really just took himself out of the Saints job like everybody else. Nobody wants that job right now. But here's what David Harrison has to say about Washington's future and how Cliff Kingsbury's continued presence benefits Washington, and I think Jaden Daniels.
Cliff Kingsbury is coming back. The offensive coordinator of the Washington Commanders returning to the team. We learned that on Tuesday afternoon. First reported by Fox Sports' Jordan Schultz. Later on, confirmed by WSA 9's Chick Hernandez. And of course, I think that is the first big win of the offseason for the Washington Commanders, is Cliff Kingsbury deciding to return to the team in 2025 instead of pursuing the only open head coaching availability currently, which is the New Orleans Saints job. Now, during the course of the postseason and during the playoffs, Cliff Kingsbury had received requests to interview with teams that had openings for their head coaching position, but declined to take any of those while the Washington Commanders were still competing. He told us several times that he wasn't going to be taking interviews during the playoffs, that he was simply focused on getting the Washington Commanders offense as prepared as he possibly could, and that he's basically, in his words, coaches hire representation for a reason. My representation will handle it and get whatever details they need to. And for whatever reason, either teams weren't willing to wait or they had other candidates that just blew them out of the water. Whatever it was, a lot of these jobs got filled leading up to the Washington Commanders eventually being eliminated from the playoffs after the NFC Championship game. And by the time that came, the only job open again, the New Orleans Saints job, and Cliff Kingsbury was supposed to interview, or at least the Saints were hoping to interview, I should say, Coach Kingsbury, but he eventually pulled out of consideration.
I think Cliff Kingsbury is making a good decision and not rushing back into getting into head coach, especially in a situation that is a very, very tough situation. And they've been kicking the can down the street in New Orleans for a long, long time. So good for him, but also I think good for Jaden Daniels. Let's get some more meat off of that bone, man, before we start breaking this thing up.
First of all, and again, Ross knows the situation. He knows the deal. The reason why Cliff Kingsbury wouldn't go to Saints is because, we talked about, the Bills, they're in a tough spot. They're $7.4 million in the hole. The Saints are $54 million over the salary cap.
How much? How many? Say that number again. How many?
54.1. It's even higher than I say. $54.1 million over the salary cap right now. And a big chunk of that is because they agreed to Derek Carr's contract, which made him a $51.4 million cap hit. And it is tied up in so much guarantees that they would owe him $50.1 million in dead money. If they were to cut him right now, they would only save $1.3 million against their cap. And you look at all their time, the most money they can save by cutting a guy is Taysom Hill for $277,000 and Nathan Shepard for $1.2 million. I don't know how they fix that roster. I don't know where it is. They're going to have to tank. That is a whoever takes that job, or whoever took that job. I don't even know who took that job, if someone has yet. But whoever has that job for the Saints, your job is to be digging you got to dig the hole further before you even get out the hole. So that's why Cliff Kingsbury didn't go there. He'd still go. And listen, you realize you got a franchise quarterback in the making that they're right in front of you. If Jaden Daniels improves and you can build an offense around him for another year or two, you could rise up your price. And who knows, maybe you can get a better situation. Maybe someone else will retire soon. You just never know what opportunities are going to open up in the NFL, right? Like, who would have thought Pete Carroll's been coaching the Raiders at 75 years old, and that's a whole other situation. But yeah, like I look at that. I don't blame Cliff Kingsbury for staying, and I think it's also a chance for him to be part of a reclamation project. Be like, hey, see, like people thought I was washed, people thought I was overrated when I got my head coaching job. Now I'm gonna show you that I'm still this great offensive mind, and then he'll get to pick and choose where he gets to go. But I think that when you're an offensive coordinator and you have a young star quarterback, you ride that until you find the other franchise where you're going to be able to find your own star quarterback where you get to be head coach.
I'm glad you mentioned quarterbacks, because we're going to talk about quarterbacks here in segment 3. We're going to start with the Tennessee Titans and my man Tyler Rowland, the Madman, of course, who hosts the Locked On NFL AM show. The Titans have the number 1 pick. There's a couple of quarterbacks that some people may like, some people may be lukewarm on. And it sounds like the new GM is going in a different direction. Of course, it could all be smoke and mirrors just to make somebody come up and take somebody and they can, load up on draft picks. I don't know who to believe, but I'll tell you what, we're still going to talk about it here in the third and final segment on Locked On NFL. Today's show is sponsored and brought to you by Game Time. Man, Game Time is the place you got to go to get any ticket that you need. Attending the NFL playoffs and the Super Bowl is an unforgettable experience that brings fans together. I remember the excitement and energy of a playoff game that I attended a couple of years ago involving the Jaguars and the Chargers. 27-0. The Jaguars came back. I had to get tickets for my family, and guess what? I got them at Game Time. They have a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets or events even easier. It filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. I recently used Game Time Picks to find tickets for a play. That's right. When I go to DC for Super Bowl weekend, there's a play that I want to check out, and I'm going to be able to do it because of Game Time. The super deal was especially impressive, offering the best value for the event. The app's features like seat views before you buy and all-in pricing with no surprise fees at checkout. I love that. I hate surprise fees. Made the experience smooth and reliable. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code. I'll spell it for you. LOCKEDON NFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. What time is it? It's game time. All right, rolling along with Chris Carter here on Locked On NFL on a Thursday, as we always do. Make sure you check out Locked On NFL every day, twice a day. Tyler rolling in the morning. It's like a double shot of espresso. He'll wake you right on up, and then you slide through the barbershop, and we basically pick at everybody all day and do the things that barbers do, and we enjoy ourselves here, and I think you'll enjoy it too. Speaking of Tyler Rowland, their team, the Tennessee Titans, the team he covers every day at his other job, they have the number one pick. They have a new GM too, and I don't know who's calling the shots over there, but their new GM who came from Kansas City, Borgonzi, he said they may build the trenches first, and Tyler Rowland is happy about it. They may pass on the quarterback. No Cam Ward, no Shedeur Sanders. Check out what Tyler Rowland says here on Locked On Titans.
The Tennessee Titans want to build through the trenches, and that is exactly why they need to draft Abdul Carter. And if you don't believe me, then listen to what Tennessee Titans' new general manager, Mike Borgonzi, had to say at the Senior Bowl. This quote, I do believe, is courtesy of Jim Wyatt, TennesseeTitans.com, but it says, quote, "You go through the roster. We're going through meetings with the coaches now. We have some holes to fill. Offensive line. That would be number one. And depth across the whole team right now. Creating competition is going to be the biggest thing, whether that's through free agency, the draft, maybe a workout guy we sign off the street. But really, we want to build the fronts first, offensive and defensive lines, then build depth along the perimeter." End quote.
I like it. I mean, I like the plan, especially if you don't think a quarterback is there. You can't go wrong with pass rushers. You can't go wrong with trenches. Chris, the organization that you cover, the Steelers, is one of the best long-term team-building teams there are. You just can't go wrong with that stuff. Sometimes, though, new guys don't want to miss on a quarterback early in their regime. They just don't, and they want to build that team up so that they can at least be okay before they bring a quarterback in. I don't know if you looked at the prospects or not, but do you think the Titans, you think they're on one here? Do you think they're on the right path to maybe just build that team up and not reach for a quarterback?
I'm not a big, this isn't my quarterback draft class if I'm going after one. Like that's my thing here. Like the Steelers fans want the Steelers to go after a quarterback, and we'll talk about them in a bit, but like, for the Steelers, they pick in 21st. You're not drafted, and unless if Cam Ward fell to you at 21, maybe that's a sign that what's going on there. But I feel like that would be a unique situation. The only thing about the Titans is if there was a quarterback that I liked in this draft class, it would be Cam Ward. I'm not a big Shedeur Sanders person, nor am I Dylan Gabriel or Jalen Milroe. If Will Howard's in the fourth, that's a whole different situation because you're drafted a guy in the fourth round. But this is not a quarterback draft class, and so to Tyler's point, if the Titans are looking to build right now, whereas you do want that quarterback of the future, and you're pretty sure Will Levis ain't it, you hear that, but you go get a guy who could be an elite player, and Abdul Carter, to his point, could be a truly elite player in the trenches, could be a game changer up front, an edge rusher that could be dominant for the next decade, and that can change a lot of things for you, right? That can make you, and you won't be a Super Bowl contender next year, but you'll start putting the pieces in place, and then if you get this pick right, then maybe you're still like in the top 10 picks next year because you still don't have the overall team chemistry. Then maybe next year is the year you go get that quarterback. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think that there's sometimes that like fans got to recognize that, past decisions where you're at, you kind of get stuck there sometimes, and sometimes you're just in a bad spot. The Titans, they things hadn't worked out with the way that they've been building their roster over the past few years. So this is the repercussions. But what you do is, instead of reaching and going and getting guys that I think that people grade as not a first overall pick guy, you draft for the best player available, and the best player available, in my opinion, at the top of the draft class, at least from what I've seen, is Abdul Carter. I think that he is that special of a player. I saw him at Penn State and just dominate. So yeah, no problems here. Go get Abdul Carter. Next year's quarterback class might be the time to make a move. And you probably still, if you're the Titans, you look at the roster, even with Abdul Carter next year, you probably still are a top 10 pick team or hovering around that range. And then you can, even if you're not in that range, you can trade up to get your quarterback. So get the trenches right, move forward with that.
I like that. Pittsburgh always has their trenches right. I got this 2-minute drill. We got about 2 minutes. Please tell me what's going on with the quarterback situation. Is it going to be Russell Wilson all over again? Will we see Justin Fields in Tennessee if the Pittsburgh doesn't decide to keep him as a developmental player?
Well, if the Steelers go with Russell Wilson, Art Rooney made it clear this past week that that they're going with one or the other. Both quarterbacks want to start somewhere. So if they pick Russell Wilson, Justin Fields will be a free agent, and he could go to the Titans. He could go to the Jets. He can go anywhere where they feel, hey, we can get a young quarterback in here who could either be a bridge or we can just make him a project. But because of that, I know Russell Wilson went on Pat McAfee's show last week and said, oh, we're in early contract talks. I think a lot of people kind of I talked to my fellow reporters in Pittsburgh, and they were kind of like, okay, they're in early contract talks, probably like the same way that they're in early contract talks with Justin Fields. I think if the Steelers are smart here, they're looking at this situation. I think Russell Wilson still has gas in the tank, but he's a shorter quarterback. The Steelers, they need to build up trenches. I think they've invested in the O-line. They had a lot of injuries on that O-line this year. They're hoping that changes. I think this year's first-round pick is going to be defensive tackle, corner, or wide receiver for the Steelers. And if you're looking to build and you want to have a quarterback that does not hit a wall soon, and let's face it, Russell Wilson's 36 years old. We just saw what happened with Kirk Cousins. Justin Fields makes a lot of sense. You went 4-2 with him. You were very conservative with him, and you did it with a game plan that was designed for Russell Wilson, not for Justin Fields. If you stick with Justin Fields, you can get him. You can try to get another mobile quarterback to play behind him, whether it's in the draft or in free agency for not spending a whole lot of money. And then you can continue to build this team the way you want to set up this team, similar like the Titans, for when you want to go get that quarterback. And listen, the Steelers, people say, oh, the Steelers, they can't get a quarterback if they keep just making the playoffs and not doing anything, because then they'll be too far back. People forget when the Chiefs drafted Patrick Mahomes, they were the 2 seed in the playoffs that year. In fact, they got bounced by the playoffs as the 2 seed coming off a bye by the Steelers. But they traded up to get Patrick Mahomes at the 10th overall pick, and it worked because they had a really good roster in place for him to inherit, and that was a good situation that he fell into. The Steelers need to build up their situation so that when they do go get their quarterback of the future, that they're coming into a good offensive line, a good run game, playmakers in the receiving game, a really good defense, and they're hitting the ground running with that rookie contract at quarterback. And I think Justin Fields is the guy that can do that for you.
Yep, and something that you mentioned, man. I gotta send a salvo right out to the Bills real quick, in the name of Sarah Bettinger. Sarah said they can't beat the Chiefs. That trade you're talking about, when they were a 2 seed, they traded 2 picks up to the Bills to take Patrick Mahomes. So, hey, I just had to throw it out there, man. Hey, sometimes you got to be careful what you wish for and what you do. All right. You don't have to be careful here on Locked On NFL because, like I said, it's twice a day. Tyler Rowland in the morning and me in the afternoon. Make sure you check us out. One more week until the Super Bowl. Until then, we'll keep giving you coverage. Hear from Mobile. I'll do that tomorrow on tomorrow's show, talk about some of the prospects here at Mobile at the Senior Bowl. Ain't no quarterbacks. But until then, you guys make sure you check out Chris Carter on Locked On Steelers and come back here tomorrow for Locked On NFL. Y'all take care of each other. We'll do the same.